What's up, guys? Welcome to the Intro to Precision Rifle Optics webinar replay. My name is Phillip Velayo, and I'm one of the founders of the Cadre training. My team and I put together this 2-hour long webinar to help answer your questions about maybe purchasing a precision rifle optic, whether you're a new shooter looking to build their first rifle or even experienced shooter looking to make that jump from maybe a mid-tier optic to a premium optic. So hopefully, based off of whatever your overall goals and application is, this is able to give you a little bit more clarity when making such a very big decision-making purchase. Now, we're definitely beyond the days of needing to spend an optic that is 3 times the value of your rifle. There's a lot of great optic companies out there that are making superb optics for a fraction of the price, but also understanding that if you are going to higher levels of competition, you need that mechanical accuracy. You need that better glass to be able to see what the wind is doing through your optic downrange, or maybe even get a little bit better resolution of that target so that you can, stack those points as a competitive shooter. Hopefully you guys enjoy the webinar. If you have any questions with regard to the webinar or training, please reach out to us. I'll provide the links down below. And one last thing, the thing that you're gonna notice is that the PowerPoint presentation is a little blown out on my main camera. So with that, we're going to provide the presentation link down below for your viewing pleasure, and you can essentially be able to follow along with that PowerPoint as I'm going through the lecture. With all that being said, hopefully you enjoy the webinar, and until then, keep your face on the gun. What's up, guys? Welcome in. For everyone coming in, what we'll do is we will wait a couple minutes for everyone to kind of trickle in here, and then start. As you guys come in, go ahead, sound off where you're at, what part of the world you're at, and what kind of shooting do you do or you try to get into. PRS, General Hunter, if you're a hunter, love to hear kind of what walks of life we're reaching out to.
Right.
Eastern Canada, awesome. Eric, am I pretty loud and clear?
Yeah, I think you're pretty good.
Okay, cool. I'm just gonna do a sound clap here. All right. People are still trickling in. Well, guys, again, Robbie, for our people in attendance, thanks for being here. And for everyone that is slowly trickling in, welcome to our Intro to Precision Optics class. This class is something that I think, especially in today's world, hopefully just allows you to just get a better understanding of some of the modern optics out there, because I think we've evolved from the traditional, like, your optic should be 3 times as much as your rifle, right? That you've heard probably in the past. I know I heard that 10 years ago, which I don't think is true today. But with that being said, depending on the level that you want to get to with regard to precision rifle shooting, there's definitely things that you should consider when making that maybe, price jump from like $1,500 to, let's say, $3,000, or even closer to $4,000 optics, right? Of like what you're actually paying for if you're in the camp of, making that jump. But if like you are still trying to figure out, hey, what optic is right for me? I've got my whole staff, majority of my staff here, and what I love about all of us is that we have different optics based off of, our price points. But not only that, we just have a full range of experience. It's not like my whole team is just running one set of precision optics. So we're gonna get to a point in the show or the class where each instructor will kind of pipe off on like, hey, what optics they're running, what they recommend it for, and what they like about it, what they don't like it, and stuff like that. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start with this presentation. Yeah, so the purpose is to pretty much give you an understanding of modern optics and what to look out for based off of your specific application, right, and maybe price point. Okay, so again, in today's world, optics, right, we've evolved from just the traditional of like I need to aim or be able to look at something from far away in high clarity, right? We've evolved to making sure that my optic is durable in the case I need to take it out the backcountry, that it's very precise when I'm making elevation adjustments out to, let's say, a mile if I'm shooting ELR, right? Or if I'm a military law enforcement sniper, especially in the military, have a good reticle design that allows me to be combat effective. Whatever one of those camps that you're in, right? Figuring out, hey, which one do I want to have a priority when I'm selecting an optic? So just keep in mind that, when we start talking about some of these things, right, everyone is going to weigh a feature slightly different than other people based off of their overall use case and application. You know what I mean? So with that being said, what is a precision rifle optic? Robbie.
It's still an aiming device.
Yeah. So we've got one student in here, and his answer is it's still an aiming device. Absolutely, right? So at the end of the day, a precision optic is, number one, the overall goal is an aiming device, is to tell my rifle what type of angular displacement I need to create to compensate for bullet drop for my rifle system, for precision, right? With that being said, it has to be precise with my angular units of measurement adjustments, but also I need to be able to see what I'm looking at, right? So those are the two biggest things at the end of the day, right? So here's the definition, and if you guys are on, you guys can follow on the presentation. The presentation slide is up on there. Hopefully you guys can see it. But unlike like a simple hunting scope where, a simple hunting scope, you would kind of set it and forget it, right? Where you, let's say, establish a 300-yard zero, and then it's like from there you're just doing holdovers. In today's world of these precision optics, we want the ability to be able to dial, right, to compensate for some of these further ranges, right? And if you're a hunter, I don't want to say, extend your range, right? But be more precise about where exactly you're aiming your rifle at so that you can essentially get the desired effects with that one shot, right? And shot placement and stuff like that, okay? So here's some key functions: magnify targets at distance, provide angular unit measurement system, allow for dialing and holding, elevation and wind, right? So reticle options, right? Allowing us to just use a quick reference based off of the reticle design. Things to consider: the optic acts as the shooter's interface with the ballistic solution, which is great because essentially my goal is to, like I said, be able to tell the optic what angle I need to displace my barrel in order to hit and compensate for bullet drop based off of my velocity, my bullet selection, so on and so forth. We are seeing Eric, Phillip, and Steve, not the screen behind Phillip if we were supposed to. So if you can't see the screen, I would highly recommend just going straight to the presentation down below so that you can follow along.
Where can you click that, Phil?
Is it not on? Is it not on the present? Is it not on? Oh well. Okay, so here. Glad you showed that. Next. Should be. No?
If you set that there, though.
Oh, it's a presentation. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. The role of the optics in precision shooting. Okay. Very first thing, target identification. So like essentially when we moved from iron sights, which iron sights did a great job at, still, especially when used correctly, was able to hit our mark, right? So then came magnified optics where we were able to see our targets from distance a little clearer, right? So I would say the biggest thing first would be target identification with a precision optic, followed by now with reticle designs, being able to have precise measurements, right? In mil-radian or minute of angle. We're going to talk about that later in the class in terms of like choosing which one based off your application and the whole mil-radian versus MOA argument, right? Just understand that target identification, measurements, elevation adjustment, right? So when I dial my elevation, right, what is happening is that my reticle is moving. So if you've ever taken your rifle and rifle scope and rifle and you put it in like some type of vise and then dial your elevation clicks, you're going to notice that the turret or the reticle will move down, right, which is essentially forcing you to aim your barrel up to compensate for that bullet drop, right? Presentation isn't working.
I clicked on that link and it didn't go anywhere.
Really?
Yeah. As far as the one that's underneath your screen.
Let's try this. Technical difficulties, of course.
When I click the link that says presentation, it does work for me.
Where are we at? Okay. Wind holds.
There we go. We're good.
Reticle allows for wind holding without adjusting turrets, which is nice. I think that's one of the biggest features that a lot of people in today's world is having really nice, precise adjustments for wind, because wind is our biggest enemy and the hardest thing to master about precision rifle shooting, which I think is fun. I'm gonna go ahead and pin my screen, and I'm also going to make this my main layout so that you guys can see that. And okay. Impact observation, which goes back with target acquisition. So being able to see exactly where my bullet goes. This is super important because one of the biggest things that we teach at the Cadre is understanding how to manage recoil so that we're able to see where our bullet lands. And now, especially in high wind conditions, reverse engineer the conditions and figure out, okay, if I miss 6/10 off the plate from center, this is probably what the wind is doing. And now I'm able to calibrate my visual senses as well as my field to that wind condition, and now like kind of put that in my experience data bank to recall on that in the case that I'm in similar situations, actually in the field. Okay, so impact observation, right? We've kind of removed the ability, especially as a self-observing shooter, needing a spotter. But I definitely think when you're still learning grassroots foundationally, like wind and stuff like that, you should definitely learn to be a good observer, because it allows you to free up your bandwidth to make better wind calls, right? Because like if you haven't gotten your fundamentals down, you're thinking about your fundamentals marksmanship versus what the wind is doing. So you probably when you're breaking your shot, the last 10% of your horsepower is like, oh, what's the wind doing? When you're observing for somebody, you're able to completely pull yourself out from connecting with a gun. You're just able to truly look at the wind as raw as it possibly can, and now make your kind of formula for what you think it's doing. You know what I mean? So Spotting impacts allows for faster follow-up corrections, and the optic enables the shooter and spotter to communicate corrections effectively. This was huge, right? Having a spotter that has a reticle inside so that both of them are able to see the same thing and make real-time adjustments and corrections based off of the ruler that is essentially 3 inches away from both each other's faces. But before, which still works, right? People would use just target size references. Hey, you're a full target off to the left or a full target off to the right, or even just inches, right? Like a lot of you guys that have grandparents and parents that taught you guys MOA or hold off back and stuff like that in inches, right? That's still all relative based off of your experience. I know I don't do that just because I've, for my whole career, I've been staring and using a reticle, right? So I think in mil radians, when it comes to angular units of measure. Okay. Moving on to the next slide. So the evolution of precision rifle optics. So back then, this is kind of what we got, right? Again, the upgraded from, iron sights. And a couple things about, where we came for optics. Number one, earlier optics was a fixed magnification, right? So you typically only had like a 1 or a 2, 3, or 4, sometimes up to a 6x, right? No variable magnification. You had wired crosshairs, right? Instead of today, we've got edge reticles that sits inside the optic, right? Which was cool. So like the unernals that the Marine Corps used that like Steve, one of our instructors on the team, used because he's a dinosaur, right? Steve used unernal?
No, we didn't have any of.
Oh, okay, never mind. And so those were wired reticles. And what's funny about those is that the mil dots were like soldered on, right? And so they were inconsistent from optic to optic, right? So a lot of the old timers would laugh how when they would do the mil relation formula to measure target distances and stuff like that, they would have football shaped mil dots and stuff like that. So they had a fixed parallax. We'll talk about parallax, but essentially parallax is your ability to focus your target, right? And this is really where keep your face on the gun comes from, is because I hate saying this. I only say it for context, but back in the day, right, with like the Marine Corps scopes, the unernals, because they were fixed parallaxes, the snipers would adjust their parallax for 300 yards and set that at that range, and then shoot all the way back out to 1,000. But if you kept your head in the same exact spot, right, and we've done this test, with even modern optics, is if you keep your face in the same spot, you don't have to worry about parallax because you're not changing the perception where that reticle is at in relation to the target, especially if you're looking dead center of the optic. So this is why keep your face on the gun, right, is super important and near to dear to our heart in our community. And one of the biggest things to keep in mind is that that phrase and that I modernized belongs to the community, not Phil Velayo. So I'll just say that. Basic duplex reticles, what you see here, this is kind of like your traditional, right, hunting rifle reticle scope, right, that you would figure out how many inches that you're holding over because you don't have any other reference marks. And now modern precision optics, we've got things like the Tremor 3 reticle. We're super busy. That allows us to shoot moving targets, win holds, gun numbers, and all that stuff, right? Or allow us to be able to, essentially shoot faster without having to dial our optic, right? The downside to, the busy reticles, right, is especially for newer shooters, is the information overload of trying to figure out, where exactly to hold, and especially if they're counting and stuff like that. So one of the things that we recommend, especially if you do have a complex reticle, is to take a picture or print a picture of your reticle on some type of overlay or like clear paper, right? That way you can study that. We use that. Steve's got a handout of training aid targets that we use in class that allows us to just give shooters a better idea of how to utilize their reticle when we're actually starting to hold for wind or hold for elevation on targets and stuff like that. But if you want like a higher quality one, what is it, Steve? Target. What's the company name? You want to drop that link in the comment?
Yeah, I think it's targetsites.com.
Yeah, target sites. Yeah. So some fun facts, competition, because of that, the quick feedback loop that you were getting from competitive shooters, especially nowadays, they helped really drive a lot of the reticle refinement. So you're starting to see these reticles born out of the necessity of what competitive shooters are facing. The global war on terrorism, the Tremor 3 was definitely, the Horus system was definitely born out of, the way that snipers were operating in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? But you're starting to see, especially for me as a competitive shooter, me gravitate back to simple reticles, right? Because what I found is with a less busy reticle, I'm able to see a little bit more information through my scope. It's not blurry, right? And depending on, again, where you're at in your journey, what your overall goals are, if you ask me why I love a simple reticle, is because target sizes in the competition world have gotten smaller, and at the end of the day, when target sizes are smaller and you want to be more precise, dialing is king. Dialing both elevation and windage allows you to focus on the center of that reticle versus holding off somewhere, not into space, but now holding off into your optic, where visually, no matter what, we're always staring at the center of something, right? So when I have to look and find reference points on a Christmas tree, I'm taking a part of my bandwidth of my brain power to focus on those things versus maybe, hey, my wobble zone sucks. What do I need to do to clean up my reticle wobble or my stability so I can stay on this small ass target at 300 yards, right? Instead, I'm thinking, oh, my hold for this target is 2 mils up and a half a mil left, right, to compensate for both elevation and wind. You guys picking up what I'm putting down, right? But that's me as a top level competitor, whereas like Steve, the coyote hunter, who's got multiple threat engagement, he just cares about putting rounds down range in a target rich environment, right? Same thing with Ian, who just came back from a hog hunt, right? Having a nice little reticle, he doesn't have to think about it. Target sizes are pretty generous. So it's all, again, application-based and depending on what type of reticle design that you want. And then in military requirements, drove features like durability, repeatability, and tracking, which we'll talk about tracking here shortly. Manufacturer tiers. Okay, so I'm going to preface this, right, with there's so many different optic brands on the market, and usually when slides like this come up in class, a lot of people get butthurt when they don't see their optic up on the screen. So please take no offense if you don't see your optic on there. It's probably just because we haven't messed with it personally. And one of the things that you'll find out about our team is that we always want to speak from experience, right? We don't ever want to, if we don't have any experience with that optic, we'll tell you outright, all right? Or we'll find somebody that maybe has experience and point you in that direction and stuff like that. But we're never just going to blow smoke up your ass to gain any type of credibility. Okay, so manufacturer tiers, we're going to start at entry level. This is like the $600 to the $1,500 price point. Right now, again, in today's world, like I said, optics have become really freaking good in terms of with an optic at $600, like the Arkin or the DNT, which I have one. The DNT I have here that you guys can see, and then for everyone that is on, I'm going to put this on my overhead that I thought was going to be on, but apparently it's not. Let me go ahead and change this real quick. So the DNT, this is a $600 optic, but you can tell this thing's a freaking tank, right? It's got things like a zero stop feature, which before 10 years ago, like you were paying $2,000 just to have a zero stop on your optic, and now it comes in at $600. If everyone doesn't know what a zero stop is literally your optic allowing it to return to zero without having any type of witness marks. Because before, when you bought a $600 optic, you would have to memorize exactly how many rotations that you were at so that you didn't get lost. Robbie, did you have to deal with that? Yeah. So returning, having your pre-fire checks or post-fire checks to make sure, hey, I just got done shooting something at 500 yards. I'm 2 rotations up on this MOA scope. I got to go back 2 rotations down and make sure that I'm at my 100-yard zero, right? You paid $1,500 sometimes just for that feature, and now it's baked into a $600 optic. Another thing is that for this D&T, it's a 7-35, right? And that's another thing, you know, that's a marketing thing is a bigger magnification or number doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a better optic, right? And I'm not the one to completely speak on power ranges or anything like that, but just understand that every optic has a specific magnification range and power factor just based off of the overall design. So entry level, the biggest thing, I would say the biggest key word for this is operationally adequate. I think that's perfect because for a guy that's just getting into long range shooting that wants to maybe shoot out to 1,000 yards, there's a lot of great optics in this price range between Vortex, Burris, D&T, Arkin, Bushnell, the Athlon scopes, right, that will get you starting in your journey of precision rifle shooting, right? Has a return to zero. The optic clarity is good enough to see the targets at maybe your home range, right? You'll have good return to zero, right? And even tracking nowadays is great, meaning that when I dial 10 mils, if you're not familiar with tracking is, if I dial 10 mils, that optic is going to track exactly 10 mils. But let's say for the average shooter, I'm just gonna really quick run through some numbers here. The average new shooter probably has only access to 1,000 yards, right? And they're probably gonna start off with probably a 308 or a 6.5 Creedmoor. Hopefully it's a 6.5 Creedmoor. So I'm just gonna run some numbers here. At 1,000 yards, you would need about 8 to 9 mils of drop, depending on your barrel length, for a 140 ELDM, which is probably one of the most common bullets right now for 6.5 Creedmoor, right? So realistically, you don't need anything more than 10 mils, and you know that optic's going to do you fine. Because again, most ranges don't even go out to 1,000 yards. Like you have to find a special place to be able to shoot that, or even go to a competition. Whereas like the average distance for competition is like 700 yards. Yeah, you might have ranges out to 11, 12, 1,300, but that's only like 2 or 3 shots, right? So that's something to keep in mind, right, in terms of like entry level. If you're first getting into this, you don't know if you really want to dive into this yet. There's a lot of great optics in this price point that are operationally adequate, okay, for you to get your foot in the door, okay? Moving on to mid-tier, right? This is your now Knife Forces, the NX6 model, the NX8, NX6 is their new line for this year. You got the Leopold Mark V and the Mark IV series, the Vortex Razor Gen 2s, which if you're a military active duty veteran, Vortex has awesome discounts. I know the guys on the team take advantage of that and get hooked up really well on that. Leopold's the same thing. And then you got your Steiner, Zeiss's, your Element optics. There's a couple more on there that are not mentioned, but Telson is a newer optic company that I've heard good things about as well, right? But here, what you're getting at is you're getting definitely a stronger optical design and usual. This is where really you're picking up a little bit better resolution when it comes to those further ranges, right? And better light transmission, right? So on a cloudy day, right, on smaller targets, you're able to pick up exactly, you know, maybe where your shots are going at 400, 500, 600 yards, right? And again, you're just getting a better, more durable design and a reliable turret system, right? This is also where you start getting into more reticle options and whatnot, okay? Moving into the premium, so this is like your Night Force Attacker, your Colossus, your Schmidt and Benders, which I have all right here. The Vortex Razor Gen 3. I have the 6-36, thanks to John. He traded me one of my Colossus for this thing. This thing is an absolute tank as well. They did a really great job on that. The Schmidt and Benders, the guys in the whole team will always have a love for Schmidt and Benders just because it is a deep-rooted into our existence as snipers, right? But even the Night Force Attacker on the Mark 13s and the Mark 22s, right, are really great platforms. For me, right, everyone that might ask like why I run Colossus is I love the overall ergonomics. So at this price point, you're also getting features, right, based off of that specific company's feature set. So like a big thing for Schmidt and benders, right, is what they call a milestone turret, right? So for every 1 mil, there's like a hard audible clunk. And we love this on the Schmidt and benders, the SSDSs, because at nighttime, when I set my dope to 0, I can hear every clunk at 1 mil. So if I need to dial to 3.2, instead of counting 32 clicks, I went to 3 hard clunks and then 2 over, right? So if I need to engage things at night without any kind of light, that was always an awesome feature. You know, with the, let's say, Colossus, I've got a top side parallax and a left side windage option, which I'll talk about why I love that here shortly as well. But really, I think at this price point too, you're getting, you know, way better optical performance. You're getting very reliable tracking, right? It's very rare that at this price point, you're gonna get a lemon in terms of like tracking capability, okay? And this is also where, when you start getting into competitive shooting, you start getting into different environments, you're gonna start seeing a lot more conditions that you normally wouldn't see at your home range, and you're able to pick up things like targets in the shade, right? Especially, you know, if you're a competitive shooter and you guys start first thing in the morning and you're facing west, or excuse me, you're facing east, right? The sun's right in your face the first thing in the morning. At the end of the day, you still gotta shoot that course of fire, that target, right? And, you know, some optics have better flare control than others, right? Or which is essentially glare from the sun. Okay, so this is where you're picking up those differences in that. Okay, do I have any questions so far? Robbie, you got anything? No, good. Okay, I got one more tier. Right, this is the ultra competitive gamer. Right, the guy that's willing to spend another $2,000 for a 1%, 2% gain in terms of overall quality, okay? So I'm talking tangent thetas, zero compromise, Collis, the new Collis line, K328s and K540s with their larger, wider field of view, and the new March optics, okay? What you're getting is extreme mechanical precision, so they're like zero tracking issues throughout their full range, right? Extremely tight manufacturing tolerances, and then premium. Literally, you're able to see all the conditions that you need to downrange and make wind calls through your optic, right? Which, again, what a lot of top-level competitors live at, to be able to read the conditions through their scope, because there's a huge difference when it comes to reading wind from, let's say, a set of binos or spotting scopes, and now reading it through your optic, okay? And then picking up exactly in terms of resolution where that bullet is at. The tangent theta, I think, lives like close to like $8,000 now because of the tariffs. Eric, he's got a tangent theta, one of the 5 to 25s. It's a great optic. That is essentially an older Premier. So if you're not familiar, the Premier optics used to live on the M110 SASs in the Marine Corps. And what we loved about them was the toolless zero design, which doesn't require any tools, which is pretty cool, right? The freaking downside as an instructor was teaching the students the difference between floating a Premier optic and a freaking Schmidt and bender, right? But you know, you're gonna have to ask yourself, oh, there he is, our boy Will. How am I doing so far, buddy?
I mean, so far so good.
Okay. All right. So tangent thetas, zero compromise optics, right? And you know, this is coming from somebody that is a Collins sponsor shooter. I think tangent theta and zero compromise has, you know, just that little bit edge in terms of overall clarity, resolution, right? Edge to edge clarity over the, let's say, the Collis at that price point. Okay, but you know what Collis has over tangent theta and zero compromise is the wider field of view, right? And if you are, again, if you're watching this and you're in this camp of optics, there's a guy that is also here in our chat who just posted up 2 videos talking about the big optic review, because he has all of these scopes and he has maybe except the March, right?
Yeah, I'm actually going to do a March review for everybody who's been asking. And post part 4 of this big series.
Yeah. Your mic isn't working, by the way.
Oh, sick.
But yeah, so check his videos out. He's got great videos in terms of like how he unbiasedly, talks about the differences of what you're getting between these optics, right? But the Collis K540 and the K320, I did a review on those as well on my YouTube if you want to check those out a little more. But the field of view on those is undeniable, especially when you're able to live at 15 or 20 power and still have a wider field of view than most optics at even 12 or 15 power, okay? So that's kind of what you're getting there with that optic. All right. Cool. So far, based off of those, the higher tier end optics, I'm going to go ahead and pause. And if you guys got any questions, I'd love to hear them, whether it's here live or on the chat. Best mounting method, level off the turret cap. Well, we're going to talk about mounting options toward the very end. I don't want to derail from kind of where we're at, but yeah, mounting options as well as considerations for purchasing optic mounts will be later in the video. So Dustin, we'll reserve that question later toward the end. Just any questions with regard to these higher end optics, optic qualities. Maybe if you guys have any questions about a specific optic that you might be right, because there's a couple of you guys in here. Well, there's 47 of you in here, and I know you have a browser open with like 2 or 3 different options, and you're like, which one do I want to go with? So ask away. We might be able to help you based off our experience, okay? So, in your opinions, biggest issues or missing features with the Night Force Attacker? Perfect. All right. Night Force Attacker, really great optic. I mean, that is, I don't have that. I have the 7-35. I did. No, it doesn't work yet, Will. I did have a 7-35. Oh, there it is, it's up top. Okay, biggest issue with the 5-25 Night Force Attacker. Great optic. Night Force is tried and true reliability-wise. I think what the Night Force really lacks is a better zero-stop system, right? Better turret design in terms of readable elevation turret, right? And this is more for the competition section. You're starting to see, right? There's no need to mash 12 to 13 to 14 mils on one rotation, right? So being able to have a clear visual idea of where your elevation is at, I think is important, right? And I think reticle design, right? The Mil XT is great, is a great reticle. I think it's still a little too busy for the guy that wants to streamline his overall process. The Mil R, is great, but it does lack, I think, those 2/10 hash marks that you would want, especially with some of those 0 to 0.5 range, 0.6 range. Because like if you think about it, I say this a lot in all my classes in terms of like the training and practical application part of it. You take 100 shots that you've taken, right? Out of those 100 shots, where has majority of your focus been with those shots? Probably the dead center of the reticle, maybe like a 1/10 or 2 to the left or right, up and down, right? So when you recover from recoil, your brain is always going to go back to that before it searches for what your actual hold was. Does that make sense? Right? Whereas like as you get further out toward the reticle design, unless you're always shooting in wind, then maybe it's like 2% or 3% that you're actually using 0.5 of mil hold, a mil of will hold, whatever that case is. So that is something to consider. But yeah, those are the two things I would think that if Night Force was able to get better at, right? Maybe an updated reticle, but also an updated turret and a zero stop feature. I have an NX6 on order attacker because the tool is 0. Yeah, the NX6 is great. Just got my scope with the Leopold Mark V. Okay. Do you see a difference between the DNT and the Arkin? I've only put them side by side once, and they're literally the same optic. You've just got a different reticle design and a different brand on it because they come from the same exact factory. Okay, I couldn't find the hype area. Are the Revic scopes more tailored to hunting, or is the Acura okay to get in the long range? No, any optic, right? I think the Revic, the Acura is perfect. When Ian jumps on, Ian has probably the most time with the Revic optics. When I was at Gunworks, they only had one, the PMR 428, which was great for the time. Optic quality was not as good as, I would say, comparable to like the Vortex Gen 2 Razor. It was super heavy. Yeah, I think at that price point, you can't go wrong with that optic. But I would definitely, at that price point, still be looking at maybe a Leopold Mark IV series, or even the Vortex, not the Strike Eagle, but the Viper PST. I had that optic for the longest time as well. So, the Telson. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, as a competitive shooter, or any of you guys, have you felt that you reached a plateau with your performance, and your limiting factor was the quality of your optic, be it glass quality, tracking, return to zero?
Yeah. Question in the audience was, as a top-level competitor, did I feel like my optic was limiting any type of performance? I would say, for me, no, but for some competitors, yes, because once you lose trust and confidence in any of your optics, right, you start to, you are now losing the mental battle when it comes to performing at a high level, right? And so when it comes to making the jump from 2,500 to, let's say, 4,000, right, what you're really getting at that price difference is like the 99% guarantee that you're not going to have a fucked up optic when the time counts and you are performing at high stakes, i.e., you just spent $3,000 to get to this match, right, between lodging, your match fees, your ammo, your time, right? And now you have this $5,000 optic, or let's say $2,000 optic, that shits the bed on you because it's no longer tracking accordingly, or you can't see the target and stuff like that. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Whereas like the $6,000 optic or $5,000 optic, especially going to local matches or whatever, and like seeing, okay, hey, after 100 rounds, the very first thing that I do is I go back to 100 yards and I see, hey, did my zero walk at all? You know what I mean? And that confidence. Exactly. Yeah, that you're essentially buying. Yeah. Great question. Okay, somebody is there, but they're rustling. Is that you, Will?
Oh yeah, I guess it is me.
Yeah. No worries. Welcome.
So it works
Welcome
now?
back. Yeah, we can
All right,
hear
fire.
you. Okay. Considerations. Price increases often reflect tighter tolerances, improved mechanical reliability. At the end of the day, what is the application of your optic, right? One of the things that we didn't talk about here yet, especially in terms of classification, are maybe some of the hunting optics, right? Second focal plane, which we'll get into. First focal plane, like Swarovski, right? So another thing that, as a hunter, you might want to be keeping in mind is, you might weigh over others is, number one, glass quality, especially in low light conditions, right? That dusk time frame is PID, and being able to see exactly where that animal's at, right? And then second focal plane versus first focal plane, overall weight. I think the best bang for buck optic that is above average in all qualities is the Leopold Mark V series, which is a very popular rifle scope, right? And then, weight-wise, right? If and durability as a hunter are obviously probably going to be your two. So like the SWFA, my buddy lives and dies by that. Gary in Powell, because that thing is a freaking tank, right? So I think it's like an $800 optic or even less than that, right? But you've got a couple of SWFAs, yeah. But you can take those things to the freaking ringer and it'll still hold zero, right? So, consider your budget. Don't let the salesman get the better of you, and in-person tests when able. And honestly, this is where I'm going to say going to competitions or going to events, even as a range officer, to help out, to get or even classes is the best way to get exposure to different stuff outside of your local gun store, right? One of our biggest pet peeves as a staff is when we go to Shields or even when we go to SHOT Show and we got guys looking at optics inside the building. They're like, oh man, that's pretty good, right? When you're staring at the ceiling only 20 feet away from you. So it's important that you're able to get out to an event to be able to truly test, some of the optics that might be in your cart or on your mind, right? And, the community's been so great to where they will happily do that if you just, ask the question and stuff like that, okay? Because usually the guys that are, have optics like that, they have some type of skin in the game, i.e. like, maybe they'll get a percentage off if they actually sell that specific optic, for some of the sponsored guys, okay? Okay, so let's talk about some scope components, right? We're gonna get basic here. So we've got the objective lens. I'm gonna grab this. Let's grab this Schmidt and Bender here, okay? So we've got the objective lens, right? This is what, the largest optic or the largest lens of the optic, right? Now, it has a myriad of features, right? It not just doesn't control, let's say, light transmission, but field of view, right? It's a combination. A lot of times, there's a stigma. I'm a little nervous here because I got my boy Will in the background right there and making sure I'm telling the right stuff. But essentially, just understand that the objective lens, along with all the other some features, controls so many different things other than that one specific purpose. All right, so it's a combination of everything. But Will, what would you say the biggest thing objective lens does? Light transmission?
Yeah, I mean, so it's going to determine two main things. It's going to be light transmission, and then it's also going to be directly affected to your exit pupil, right? But light transmission is also going to be a combination of the entire optical lens system. So, like, for those of you that don't know, then this might be kind of in the weeds, but like, there's not just two lenses in a rifle scope. Like, it's not just the objective, which is the front lens, and it's not just the back lens, which is the ocular. There's, like, a tangent theta, for example, has, I think, around 17 lenses inside the entire optical system. Don't quote me on that. It may be a smidge less, but either way, there's a ton of lens stacking, and so all of that is going to control the ultimate light transmission. Otherwise, everybody would have been shooting that Hensoldt 4-16 that had like a 72 mil objective, which was just crazy. But yeah, I mean, it's very important in terms of light transmission, but there are some that are more optimized with smaller objectives that do better with light transmission as well. So, but yeah, long story short, objective lens equals, in theory, better light transmission and exit pupil.
Cool. Thanks for that. Next, you get your ocular lens. This is what you're actually looking through, right? This is going to control your focus of your reticle, right? How clearly you can see the reticle inside of your optic, right? Moving on to the erector system, right? So the erector system kind of lives in here, right? And so as I'm adjusting my magnification for a variable powered optic, right? There's lenses shifting around in there. And so one of the things that is super important is to make sure that you're abiding by not only the scope manufacturers, but the ring manufacturers' torque settings, right? Because a lot of times people get, it's too tight to where now it's bound up and it's sticky, right? To where you don't have a good smooth throw. So that's one thing to keep in mind is you want to make sure that you're adhering to those in the both rear and the front of the optic, okay? So that's the erector system, right? We'll talk about first focal plane versus second focal plane here shortly. And then your reticle, right? If you ever look at what an actual reticle size looks like, I mean, that thing is no bigger. Like, the actual print is no bigger and the lens is no bigger than your thumbnail. It's crazy with how small that lens is inside, okay? Moving into the erector system is often the most complex mechanical component, and failures often originate from this internal assembly. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind based off of that, right, is that the inside, this is for my guys that have probably a better understanding of optics, right? Inside this optic, or the elevation turret in the erector assembly, right, is essentially, as you're dialing this, it drives that erector system down. So really, not only is the erector system moving front and back, but it's pinned up against the elevation turret and even the windage turret, right? So based off of any kind of movement that you're doing with your clicks, we want that movement to be really precise, because it's changing, right, the angle in which we're perceiving the movement of our barrel, right? So that is why, right, this, Frank Galley says the best is the weakest link of any type of precision rifle system other than the shooter is the optic, okay? Because there's so many fine controls that need to be made right for us to be able to, get the mechanical solution that we want out of a precision optic, okay? Okay, external controls. We've got the elevation turret, right? That's usually on top, and then we've got our windage turret that's on the right. Now, this is for me as why I prefer the Colossus, because as a Colossus, I have the ability to put a left side windage. And if you guys haven't watched my videos lately, I've been using my meta glasses that allows you to see why left side windage is beneficial, because as a right-handed shooter, I don't have to take my face off the gun when I dial for wind. I know exactly what my wind is dialed on, and for me, that's worth the price of any of the Colossus optics that I run, and a huge reason why I gravitated to them in the first place. A little untraditional than what I came from the Schmidt and Bender or from traditional rifle scopes with the right side windage, okay? But like I've said, as a competitive shooter, I've kind of gone through the full arc and journey of when I first started off as a Marine sniper, it's doctrinally that we dialed for everything, because we always had a spotter and I'm holding center, right? And if I missed, my spotter gave me a correction based off of what type of hold I needed to make back to center mass on the target. So it was like, hey, you missed off the right, just hold left shoulder or left elbow, left side of the body, okay? And then when I got into competitive shooting, I realized at that point dialing was too slow because wind was so dynamic, and so I was holding for everything. And now that target sizes have gotten smaller in the competition space, I've gone back to dialing because my processes have just evolved again from my first competition to now, to where I'm able to even dial both elevation and windage in even a multiple target array and still make time, okay? Whereas if you're just getting into competition shooting, the last thing that I'd probably recommend is for you to try to do all that at once. But I'm in the camp that a good precision rifleman knows when to execute each technique based off of those specific conditions and their overall understanding of their own limitations and capabilities, right? So there's instances where I hold, and there's instances that where I dial, okay? So that is the windage turret. Here's a good rule of thumb. If you are dialing on a traditional rifle scope on the right side, right, and you're trying to if you need to go right, the acronym that we use is pull right, or I am always right. You're pointing towards you. That means that you need the strike of your round to go to the right. And then the next is push left, right? So you're pushing away, push left. So push left or pull right. So for sniper observer dialogue, you would hear the observer tell the shooter, hey, push left 0.2 mils or pull right 0.2 mils, whatever the correction needed to be, right? So just keep in mind with your thumb, push or pull right, push left, pull right. Okay, moving on. Parallax adjustment. Okay, let's talk. Okay, parallax adjustment, that's typically found on the left side. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about parallax here shortly. I don't want to get into it right now, but this is your feature sets. Same thing, Colossus has a topside parallax, right? And then magnification ring, that's usually found closer to the ocular lens, right? And then, One of the things that you would want, especially if you're getting higher up, is how smooth that throw is, right? Based off of, again, the specific optic manufacturer. Okay, considerations. Parallax adjustment is frequently misunderstood by newer shooters. Accurate turret tracking is essential for precision shooting. I think we do have a parallax slide here. Okay, optical terminology. Okay, eye relief, right? So eye relief is the distance that you need to have in order to get the best sight alignment, sight picture where you're free of shadows, right? So if you think of your eye box, right, there is a Z, X, and Y component to it. So the depth in which your eyeball, so if my reticle is the eye, my eye, or my pen is the eye, right, I've got a forward and aft. I also have a left and right, and I also have an up and down component, right? So from a practical standpoint, how is that controlled? Well, first we set on our eye relief, right, where the optic sits in the rings and on the rail for most modern actions, right, in terms of the depth, okay? So that's where we get our first setting, typically, right? And if you don't know how to set that, right, check out some of the videos that we have on our YouTube, but also there's a myriad, just Google, like, how do I set eye relief, and, you know, there's MDT videos or whatever. I would probably stick more to the modern ones because some stuff is definitely outdated, but MDTs does a really good job of keeping up to date with modern trends. But first we set our eye relief that way, right? The second is our left to right, okay? That biggest thing is just making sure that we're establishing our rifle to shoulder connection the most modern way, which is high and medial, which is what we talk about in all of our teachings, okay? Because how I connect to the rifle also affects how I put my face on the gun, right? The further it is out here to a traditional rifle to shoulder connection, which is the pocket of the shoulder, it's going to cause me to do what? Lean my head over to the right, okay, which now kind of changes my perception of like my X and Y axis, right? And then your vertical axis is controlled by where you're putting your face in reference to the cheek weld, okay, or the cheek riser, right? And so there's two schools of camps that we teach, whether it's cheek weld or jaw weld, the pros and cons to each technique, right? But for a competitive shooter, in short, I recommend a jaw weld, and if you're a military, law enforcement, sniper, or even a hunter that really relies on their optic to observe, then you want to establish a cheek weld because it allows you to get the true resting point of your face on the optic and still get that Y-axis approach to your eye relief, okay? Now, one of the things that I like to do, and I usually do this in class as well, is to completely show that. And you can do this at home. You're going to shine a light through the other side, and you're going to see that the image projects, or the light projects on like a note card. As you bring the note card closer, the circle gets smaller. The point at which it gets the smallest before it opens back up, that is your optimal eye relief, right? Now, one thing to keep in mind is that changes based off of your magnification. So right now I'm on 7 power, and you can see here that I've got a pretty good window before it opens and closes, right? Because I'm on the lowest magnification. Not only that, it's super bright, right? But as I increase my magnification all the way to 35, the very first thing that you're going to notice is the optic is a little dimmer, or the light's a little dimmer because it limits light transmission, right? But also, the point at which it gets the smallest is very, very small, your exit pupil, right? So you've got a very small window. And so when you're setting up your optic, you want to make sure you set your optic up on the highest magnification because you're setting it up to where it's the least forgiving, so that hopefully when you actually apply good practices in terms of utilizing your magnification, that you're shooting on a lower magnification, you buy yourself a little bit more room for forgiveness when it comes to your eye relief, okay? So something to keep in mind, right? Next is field of view, right? This is just how wide you're able to see. Again, a big thing is just being able to identify targets and whatnot, and you know the Collis K540, K320, even the March. Apparently, I haven't looked through a March, but I hear the field of view has been great with those newer optics. Exit pupil, the diameter of the light exiting the optic. That's kind of what we talked about with your eye relief. Okay, parallax. Let me go ahead and ask the audience and the audience in here, as well as my shooters online. What do you think parallax is in your best owned terminology?
It's putting the reticle on the same plane as your target.
Putting the reticle on the same plane as the target. I love that. All right, guys, let's see what we got here in the public chat. How would you define parallax? Align focus of image to the reticle. I think we've gotten better. I think I talked about this before. I think I talked about this in the last class. The information age today is obviously a lot better than it was 10 years ago. So like you're starting to see when you ask that question, not more correct answers, but more refined answers. From before, it was just kind of like regurgitation of like what is natural point of aim. Everyone would tell us how to check it, but not really what the true natural point of aim is. Okay, so parallax, what it is and what it is not. What parallax is all you're doing with parallax is you're focusing the target through the optic, right? And the byproduct of that is you're putting the reticle on the same plane. So if this is my reticle, right? So what you could do if you're standing about 2 or 3 inches away from your screen right now, you would do is put your finger up, right? And you would say, okay, hey, that is me looking on the Phil right now on the center of his forehead or wherever, on his man bun. And then what you're going to do is you're going to move your head to the left and to the right. And what it should do is it changes your perspective of where your finger is at. So when you adjust for parallax correctly and you eliminate it, you're now putting your reticle on the same plane as your target, right, wherever you reference at. Now, even if you move your head, that aiming point stays at the same exact spot, all right? The very first thing that you should notice, though, is that your target is going to be out of focus, right, if you have parallax, okay? Now, it's more important to have parallax at the closer distances than it is further distances, right? This is why rimfire shooters spend freaking thousands of dollars on glass, because they're sometimes shooting targets super close, and they need to be able to have refined. Now, I'm not saying that parallax is not important at further ranges, right? But it's not as it's less. It's more forgiving at further distances than it is closer distances. Okay. That being said, another thing that you're probably getting when you get into those higher tier optics is your, remind me the word I'm looking for, depth of field.
Yeah, you'll get better depth of field. So essentially, it creates. I don't like necessarily the 3D effect term, but yeah, it's sort of where you can see clearly, like, hey, my target is at 400, but there's a clear distinction between it and like the targets behind it at 700, etc.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So like when you hear depth of field, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Will, but essentially, when you have an optic that has good depth of field, you could literally run, let's say, like a 500-yard parallax, right? Or if you set, and you'd still be able to run like a 300-yard troop line all the way out to like 800 without adjusting it, right?
Yeah. So that's that's a benefit of some of like the higher end optics is they're very what we call like parallax insensitive, meaning that like for the majority of an entire match, let's say, I can set it kind of roughly around the middle-ish, or I'll know a spot like on my tangent or whatever it is, and it'll be good from like 250 yards to like 1,000 yards, basically. You can fine-tune it a smidge in there, but for competition purposes, you basically don't need to touch it unless you're getting super close, like 100 yards or something like that.
Let me chime in here for a second, guys. So parallax really matters at 100 yards, right? Middle range is okay. So all I do, this is also a tangent. This piece of tape, you probably can't see it, but I have 3 parallax settings set on my ring. I have a close, which would be 100 yards. Then I have a medium, which would be like 300 to 600, and then I basically set it to infinity for anything past that. That's how I use my parallax, because just like Will's saying, these tangents, they're pretty top-notch, really good quality glass, and the parallax is not that sensitive.
That's the first time that I heard you talk nice about the tangent, Eric.
That's not true at all, dude. I'm just not going to spend that money, dude.
All right. Hopefully that helps, guys. Really, the biggest thing with parallax, right, is that you should always be checking it, especially when it comes to just making sure, right, in the game of precision, right, we want to eliminate as many variables as possible, right? And so I'm guilty of this if I'm being lazy and I don't check my parallax at 100 yards to the tee, my zero will wander, right, all over the place because, again, I'm lazy. I'm not, my head is not directly behind the optic. So if you see your zero floating around, 0.05 to a tenth all over that board, it's probably because you didn't check your parallax, right? Another thing to understand too is that there's a lot of things that go into your parallax adjustment as well that is just outside of the scope, like lighting conditions, right, and even temperature, right? Is that correct, Will?
Yeah, I mean, so what I would say, just to like back you up just a smidge, is one thing that I see with a lot of shooters that ends up being like a super critical point in parallax that gets set improperly a lot is the diopter. And if you have a improper diopter setting, or the way that you set it up wasn't correct, then, I mean, you'll basically never get parallax free in some cases. So you really want to make sure that you take the time to really dial in that diopter, the exact way that you're supposed to do it. There's a lot of different videos, good videos on the internet showing you on YouTube and stuff how to like properly set a diopter. But that's yes. And then as far as ambient temperature, mirage and stuff like that, that can definitely affect it. And I mean, sometimes even with the best glass, there's no such thing as like a scope that can cut through mirage. I know some guys have used that in the past to describe certain optics. It's not physically possible to cut through mirage because that's an environmental effect. There are optics that handle mirage better, but even if it's just really bad, it doesn't matter what you have, a tangent or anything else, mirage is just going to kill the image regardless. Sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it, and so you just kind of fight through it. But yeah, that's kind of where temperature and environmental factors would play a difference in parallax for sure.
You're my boy, Blue. I appreciate you. Okay, glass quality. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I don't have the tools, or I don't have the education that some of the people that I respect in this industry, like Will or Ilya, that really understand and dive into understanding like glass quality and stuff like that. For me, right, I focus more on the practical stuff. Not saying that this isn't practical, right? But I know a lot of people lose their minds when it comes to, chromatic aberration or resolution and stuff like that. And, to be honest with you, I've never missed a target because I've had chromatic aberration on my target. That's, not completely white, to be completely honest with you. So just understand that with glass quality, I think things that are important are definitely resolution, right? Especially when you want to see clear edges of the target. I know that I've been in situations, as Will, with all the competition experience that I have, is where I don't see the target until I hit it, because now I'm finally able to see as it rocks the edges of that target, right? Whereas I think those higher glass qualities, right, especially if you're jumping from like a $1,000 optic to a 4,000, you're hopefully able to see those a little bit more clearly. You know what I mean? Especially again in those lighting conditions that are not perfect, right, or that you're not potentially used to. Edge-to-edge clarity, God, I didn't really appreciate edge-to-edge clarity until I was hunting this past season, and I had a set of optics that didn't get lost in the fire, thankfully. But it's supposed to have really good glass, and like I tried to hunt with it a couple times and just staring at it. And again, the center of the optic was great, but as you know, when you're hunting and you're glassing in that one spot and you're looking through peripheral, I could just not stand how blurry and just how distorted the edges of that optic was. So I was like, I ordered a pair of 12x42s to get NL 12x42s to get shipped to me the next day, so that I could finish my hunt season, because I was just sick of it. So edge to edge clarity is definitely a real thing. It's just how clearly from the center of the optic all the way to the edge that you can clearly see a specific object, and then improve performance shooting in low light. Okay. Optical differences become the most noticeable in poor lighting conditions. So this is what I'm talking about, right? Going back to the very first kind of conversation that I had at the beginning, right? If you're just getting into precision rifle shooting, you know that you're only, like let's say if you're in California, you've got the Angeles shooting range there. They only go out to 600 yards. Sure, you're not going to notice the difference between a $600 Arkin or $600 D&T in terms of, performance, because you're not going to be able to dial, and unless like you're shooting in cloudy areas or cloudy days all the time. My biggest pet peeve is when people, especially on the internet, and these influencers are like, "There's no difference between my $600 Arkin and $3,000 Night Force." It's like, okay, dude. But yeah, you're not going to notice those differences, right? Until you start getting out of, let's say, your home range and finding yourself in more scenarios, right? And this is where hunters kind of see a lot of that, because you guys are, sometimes, facing east, facing west, right? You're looking into the sun, looking in shadows and stuff like that. So you really want to lean on some of those better light, or some of those better glass qualities. Mechanical precision, this is just pretty much tracking consistent click values. So just making sure that if I dial the 5 mils that I'm getting exactly 5 mils, right? Now, here's a pro tip. In the case that, let's say that you don't know how to perform a 100-yard tracking test, which a 100-yard tracking test, in order to do it correctly, you need to make sure that you have an actual yardstick tape. Your target is actually flat and level facing towards you, right? And that the center of your optic is truly 100 yards on the dot to your, in that, you Doppler mill, so you could do it both ways. You could do it non-live fire, which you got to make sure that whatever mechanical set that you are putting that optic in, it's not moving, right? Or you can just dial it, or live fire, where you would essentially aim at the very bottom of the paper, shoot a 3-round group or 2-round group, dial 1 mil, aim at the same spot, and then just measure to make sure that if I'm in minutes or mils, if I'm in mils, that next point of aim is 3.6 inches, followed by 7.2. This is definitely not in the scope of this video, but there's a bunch of other YouTubers and stuff like that talk about scope tracking and how to do it. But a good pro tip on if you don't know if your scope is tracking and how you find this out is, let's say that you're trying to figure out how to essentially true your ballistic solver, right? So you go out to 1145 and you realize, God, there's no way that I can get this range based off of what the firing solution is telling me. So let's say the firing solution tells you at 1,100 yards, because that's your furthest, that you need to come 10 mils. And then all of a sudden, you're coming down to, you're coming to, like, let's say 9.5. And then you're looking in the Hornady forward off, and it's like, hey, you're adjusting way too outside of the parameters to be able to effectively adjust this drag curve, right? And so what you would do is, instead of dialing that 10 mils, is you'd hold it in your reticle, and you would see if that impacts. And so that is how we test it in the fly in our classes. And we've seen that with optics all the time, is when we go through our trajectory validation portion, is students' ballistic solvers are not immediately lining up and they're way off. And we've checked their zero, we've checked their sight height, we checked their muzzle velocity, everything lines up, but they're still like 6-7 tenths outside the range by dialing. So we tell them to go back to zero, confirm their zero. Okay, your zero's confirmed. Now I want you to hold 10 mils at that 1,000, and they're usually dead center. And that tells me now it's a tracking issue, right? So that is a good way to also check if you potentially are having tracking issues. A little bit more advanced, assuming that you know what you're doing, right? But that is a quick, expedient way to double check, especially if you're in that camp of like, my firing solution doesn't make sense, right? We've seen as a staff, we've seen hundreds of rifle and bullet combinations. And today, the firing solution today that Hornady has between Hornady 4DOF and the AB, I mean, as long as you're putting everything in correctly, I have not seen a solver more than 2/10 off, right? So if you're like 4, 5, 6/10 off, you definitely have some type of input error, or again, you're having tracking issues. So that's something to think about. Anything I missed there, Will or Steve or Eric? Okay. Okay, even excellent glass cannot compensate for poor mechanical tracking. That is, okay. Everyone's favorite subject, mil versus MOA, all right? So this is where all of the numbers come in, okay? This is what I'm gonna say about mil versus MOA. It doesn't matter, right? They're both the same thing in the sense that all I'm doing with MOA or mil is telling my rifle scope based off of what I want to interpret is what angle I need to make or compensate for my bullet drop at distance or my wind correction. Now, Frank Gelly, I think, said this best many years ago, is choosing the system is depending on how you want to communicate and based off the application in which you want to go into, right? So in today's world of competition, you're starting to see a lot of, or you see majority of mil shooters, right? Even hunters getting into NRO hunter or even competition are starting to switch over because they're seeing the benefits of how quick it is to get to your specific firing solution, but also some of the gun number references and stuff like that with mils and speed drop and stuff like that. Numbers are just a little bit more cleaner than an MOA system. Now, yes, the argument of an MOA system, you can essentially dial, more precise than mil because you got that quarter mil versus a third of a mil, or a third of a minute, a quarter minute versus third of a minute adjustment, right? But not too many people in the world can shoot the difference between both of those, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and switch frames here, right? So this right here is an MOA turret system, right? And then right next to it is, let's say, a mil turret system. I don't know if you guys can see that clearly, right? So on the left is minutes, on the right is mils. So you can see, just in terms of practical application, I have a lot cleaner or bigger numbers on my mil than I do on my minutes. And that's one of the things that I notice when I have shot a minute optic at a match, is that I felt like I was dialing forever to get to my firing solution comparatively to my mils, okay? Now, I don't want to sit here and bore you with regard to, the conversions. Here this is and stuff like that, right? Just understand a good, hard, fast rule is 1 mil is 3.6 inches at 100 yards, which actually equates to 0.1 mil, so 1 click of a tenth is about a third of a minute or an inch, right? And then minute of angle, most scopes just down to a quarter. I think bench rest, some optics go down to an eighth, right? But 1 MOA equals 1.047 inches at 100 yards. The last thing that I'll say with regard to this is, a lot of people put emphasis on the linear distance that they're looking at downrange. So, for instance, at 500 yards, and I think this is more of the old school shooters that have calibrated their brains to understand what 5, 7, 8, 10, 12 inches look at distance. Whereas because I've grew up on a mil rifle scope, I don't see that. I see mils. And so what I mean by that is a lot of times early on in my career as an instructor, students place a lot of heavily emphasis on trying to convert the linear distance of how much they were missing into inches. So they were saying, okay, at 500 yards, hey, you're missing 10 inches off the left. Well, to be completely honest with you, I don't know what 10 inches off the left means that far away, even through my rifle scope, right? But what I do have 3 inches away from my face is a ruler in units of measure, or milliradians or MOA. So I'm just going to drag that over, whether it's 2/10, 3/10, 4/10. I don't care what that actual linear distance is in inches or feet or yards, right? Because all I'm doing is manipulating an angle anyways, right? So you get that both with MOA and mill. It's just, again, depending on what you want to communicate with. I have found, though, in hunting situations, if I'm being completely honest with you, if I want to figure out how big of a rack I'm looking at in terms of antler size, it's easier to convert that distance or that measurement in MOA quicker than mills, right? There's an extra step of mills that you have to do to be able to figure that out, right? But there's formulas and stuff like that all over online to be able to figure that out if you want to do that. Okay.
Can I just add some real quick?
Yeah, please.
Kind of like a fundamental understanding. I just want everybody to realize that yards and meters do not matter in that discussion in any way, shape, or form. So if you came in here with the preconceived notion that, well, I measure everything in yards and I shoot 100 yards and 200 yards, then I must use MOA, you're wrong. You're just flat out wrong. It has zero to do with that. You are doing an angular measurement the same distance. So I don't care if my target is 500 meters or 500 yards. Mill and MOA is just how I'm going to get there. But it has nothing to do with yards and meters. So it bothers me when that kind of stuff still gets propagated this far along in how we are in modern times. So just please keep that in mind. And you know, anytime you have a discussion with a sales guy at a store and he says MOA is better because you're in yards, he's just wrong, period. So the more that we can kind of instill that in people's minds and then just pick, I'm not saying one's better than the other, but just pick the unit of measure, in my opinion, based on your environment and what your practical application is. If you want to choose MOA because you think you're going to be measuring racks on an elk or a deer, you know, the majority of your lifetime, then by all means go ahead. Or if you want the mills because it's a little bit cleaner to dial, then by all means go ahead. Or the people that you shoot with, right? I always tell shooters to consider that. If your entire shooting group of people that you shoot with shoot MOA, then it's easier to give each other corrections in MOA. As Phil said, you got a ruler in front of your face. So don't tell me I missed by 10 inches off the left. Tell me I missed by, 0.75 MOA off the left. Okay, great. That I can adjust. Or if your entire group of shooters is in mills, it'd be easier to give a mill correction in that way. So just some of the things to think about. But just yards and meters have no bearing on this discussion in any way, shape, or form.
The one thing that I was kind of trying to do, but you can't see it because the screen is blown out, is just what in terms of like the practical differences of what a firing solution looks like with MOA versus mills. Again, you're looking at typically only 2 numbers unless you get into over a 10 mil rotation for mills, but typically you only have 2 numbers to memorize. So like my dope for 400 for a mill scope on a 308 would be 2.2, right? Versus like an MOA, it would be probably closer to like 8.75, right? So now I have 3 numbers to try to memorize versus just 2, right? And then the mill is what we call a 10-base system, right? Meaning that for most people, they're easier. It's going to be faster for you to compensate and understand. If I said, hey, if I gave you 15 dimes versus 15 quarters, right? How much money do you have in one hand versus the other? If versus dime versus quarters, you're probably going to spit out the dime answer quicker, $1.50 versus the 15 quarters. It's going to probably take you a few more seconds to figure that out, right? Because now you're compensating in quarter minutes or quarters, right? This is why the Leopold PR2 is why they do that. Just kidding.
Real quick, I actually do just want to give you guys a actual solution or comparison for a solution in MOA versus Mills. So my 6.5 Creedmoor, shooting 153 A-tips at 2670 feet per second. For 600 yards in Mills, my solution is 3.8. So all I have to remember is 3.8. In real time, I'm going to change that to give me the MOA. So I haven't changed anything. I just switched my scope to MOA, and I am now at 13.2 or 13.19, which means I got to go to 13.25 is how I would round that, because MOA scopes are in 0.25s. So, you know, just a little bit of what you'd be looking at in terms of a real life solution at 600 yards.
Yeah, and the last benefit, this is us just like pretty much selling Mills, but I see a couple questions in there. The last thing is gun number, right? Which, like, when it comes to, you know, wherever you're at in your journey of precision rifle shooting, the last arc, I think, for most shooters in terms of like understanding how to get better at becoming a better wind caller is by understanding wind and how to reverse engineer it. And so one of the concepts we teach, or that's out there on the internet, we don't just teach it, right? But it's out on the internet, is gun number. And so gun number lines up more cleanly on mil radian measurements than MOA measurements, right? With MOA, there's an extra step of math and typically a larger number that you have to memorize, versus in mils, you know, my gun number for my 6.5 Creedmoor is, let's say, 6 miles per hour. So I've got clean numbers from 300 all the way out to 7, meaning that if I've got a 6 mile an hour wind, if I've got a target at 600 yards, my wind call would be 0.6 mils, right? It's just using the distance to my target in tenths of a mil, right? Whereas in MOA, there's an extra step of math where I have to now chop that number in half, right? And when we start talking about building our intuition, and what we teach in our in-person classes, it's, okay, hey, we're gonna shoot this target at 600 yards. You're gonna aim dead center, and you're going to force yourself to miss, and you're gonna reverse engineer what your miss was. And by having a good understanding of gun number, you can quickly calibrate yourself to those wind conditions and figure out, oh crap, I missed 0.6 from center at 600 yards, so it's a 6 mile an hour wind. This is what it's doing at 6 mile an hour. This is the angle of the mirage. This is what the leaves are doing. This is what the grass is doing. This is what I feel on my face, right? So you're able to calculate that stuff in real time faster on a mil radian system, understanding gun number, than you would with an MOA scope. So that's going to be my last kind of plug there for that. All right. So if you guys have MOA scopes, I'm sorry. Just kidding. They still work, right? But I'm always going to be team mil. All right, we're moving on to first focal plane versus second focal plane. I think everyone, again, in today's world understands this. You're starting to receive less and less second focal plane scopes, but they are out there, like Swarovski. They still all manufacture second focal plane scopes. I think there's still a lot of benefit to that, especially if you're hunting out east, right? And you don't have the distances out west like we do, right? Where you need to be able to see that reticle or that crosshair Dyson Big, okay? Just understand that on a second focal plane scope, right, that in order to read the full mil radian or measurement, you have to typically most likely be on the max magnification, whereas there's a few optics that give you a reference in terms of what half is, and now everything is kind of doubled, okay? But essentially, first focal plane, the reticle sizes change with zoom, right? So again, people out east that only hunt like 60, 70, 100, 125 yards, right? You know, they're probably living on 3 to 5 power. They probably can't even see their reticle at that magnification, right? So they hate it, right? So a second focal plane would probably be, but if you're heading out west, right, where you've got a lot of big open country, I mean, usually, unless you jump up on an animal, like, I mean, I've had to close the distance on elk and deer from a mile to 200 or 300, right? Whereas at that point, if I'm shooting something at 300 yards, I have a lot of time and opportunity on my side, especially if I did my, stock correctly, where I can just zoom in on my magnification or whatever and see my optic clearly. It's not one of those, happenstance in quick engagements. Although I know that does happen. When I shot my caribou 2 years ago, it was one of those things I was just walking, and then my only opportunity, because All the other caribou that I'd seen throughout that trip was miles away. I was like, dude, I'm not going to let this one pass by me. So I shot that sucker on the move at 300 yards, which I'll play a video one of these days for it. So second focal plane, reticle size stays fixed throughout the full range. Okay. Considerations. First focal plane designs and dominates the modern precision shooting. So you're starting to see probably 99% of competitive shooters running first focal plane optics, right? And you're starting to see a lot of hunters that are seeing the benefits of competition run first focal plane and not hinder their ability to use it effectively. Okay, moving into reticle designs. So before I go into that, do I have any other questions so far? Based off the initial speed of this class, I thought we were going to be done in an hour, and we're already an hour and a half in. So, Robbie, how's it? Good? Cool. Any questions from the chat? Dang, dude, we got 60 people in here. Okay, that's what's up. It's a big audience. Appreciate you guys answering the questions, Eric, Steve, and Will. Okay, no questions so far, so I'm just going to push. Okay, now we're on reticle designs. I kind of talked about this earlier, right? But traditional mil-dot reticle, right? One of the earliest precision rifle designs, right? The TMR is out there. The Schmittenbender 3-12 SSDS is a mil-dot reticle. Okay, I definitely have grown to love the Hashmark reticle more recently, right? That's like on the Colossus, the skimmer pluses, on the ZCOs, that's the Impact X.
3X, Impact 3X or 2X.
Impact 3X, and then the what's the tangent theta? The Gen 3 XR?
Yeah, Gen 3 XR. I have the Gen 3 XR Fine or the Gen 2 XR. They have a couple of different options, but the XR is really good.
So if you guys are on the slide deck right now, this top left reticle is the skimmer reticle, but this is honestly a lot of my reticle designs now that I've gravitated because you can see there's less busyness, right? And again, from a practical application standpoint, right? When I get hit with recoil, okay, most right-handed shooters, and I'd say, I'm gonna just to throw a bold number out there, probably about 90% of the world that is shooters that don't understand how to manage recoil properly as a right-handed shooter, they're most likely going to come high into the left after they've recovered from recoil, okay? Because if you think about the recoil impulse, especially if my face driving on the back of that gun, recoil is going to exploit those angles, and under recoil, my face getting pushed on the side of that gun is going to drive that gun down into the right, which is now going to bring my reticle high into the left, okay? So typically, what shooters will do is now freeze frame, right? But if they have a bunch of bullshit underneath, like, a bunch of Christmas trees or mil dots or stuff like that, right? Especially if they're shooting a small caliber bullet, right? And they're shooting in wet mud, that bullet gets soaked up and you're like, oh crap, I don't know where that bullet went. And now you're just guessing it all over again, okay? So for me, I want to be in the camp where I don't have that noise, because I would say, even out of 100 my trigger presses, even as a top level competitor, my reticle is still jumping up into the left. All right, but now I have a cleaner way of being able to spot my impacts and misses, right? To be able to now process what kind of correction I need to make back on target, okay? Now that is for my application as a competitive shooter, but I see the benefits, let's say for like now weapon mounted laser rangefinders, to what we call Christmas tree reticles, right? Whereas with these weapon mounted laser rangefinders, you establish what they call a parallel zero, right? So a parallel zero, again, it's amazing the time that we live in, right? So a parallel zero is where the zero of this weapon mounted laser rangefinder is zeroed with my optic on the same parallel, right, or infinite zero. But that's when my optic is set at 100 yards. As soon as I dial up, now I lose that parallel 0, right? So every time I dial the system, my rangefinder becomes completely useless, right? So this is where holding using a Christmas tree, right, especially for my military law enforcement snipers or my more tactical shooters, right, that may be running team sniper competitions, or if my Steve Hollands that are absolute coyote slayers and they have a multi-target rich environment, they want to be able to quickly engage multiple targets without dialing, and now they're just holding over for both elevation and windage at distance, okay? So that's where the benefits of a Christmas tree come in, right? And then floating dot center uses a small center aiming point, so on and so forth. Advanced grid reticles, right? This is the Tremor 3. This was highly used for, again, shooting people, bad guys, right? But you've got a whole complex kind of wind dot system as well as mover system, which was great, especially on a gas gun, right? When you're really talking about precision volume of fire, right? To put heads down. And stuff like that, so that, you know, as a precision marksman in a designated squad, you're able to allow the maneuver element to move freely, right, while you're sending precision shots downrange. Okay, testing scope performance, things that you can do. We talked about it, tall target tests. You do a box test, and then a zero confirmation. One of the things that I think is a good practical thing to do is always keep track of how many rounds that you fire in between shooting your 0 to then reconfirming 0. So one of the things that I do as a competitive shooter is that I know I'm always roughly in the camp of 250 to 300 rounds between my cycles. And so once I can check my 0, at the very end, after shooting a competition, I'll reconfirm my 0 just to build confidence in my system that I didn't have any type of 0 walk in that, okay? Tall target test. Again, when I'm buying a $5,000 optic, I'm going to be completely honest with you, the last thing that I do is immediately do a freaking tall target test, mainly because I don't have time. But I realize for people that are spending this amount of money into this, that's probably the first thing you want to do. It's a little labor intensive, right? But if you want and have time to do it, I would highly recommend doing it yourself, right? But the only time that I actually really do that is if I'm noticing issues, right? Like I said, in terms of trajectory validation or whatever, where like, God, man, I'm like 5 or 6 tenths off. I know my 0 is good. Something's not happening. I'll do a tall target test. That way I have evidence. So when I'm sending it back to my manufacturer, I can say, hey, I've done this tall target test. Here are my results. This is what I'm getting. And then, you know, I have all of that data as well, okay? Box test confirms that the turret adjustments return back to 0 for both elevation and windage, right? And so on and so forth. One thing that I do, and I don't know if this is something that you do, Will, but Bo Wynn taught me this. But every time I zero my optic, so let's say I zero it, I make my adjustments, I float it back to 0. Before I actually start now manipulating the turret, whatever, I'll do a full erector reset. And what I mean by that is once I set it to 0, I'll take that optic and I'll run through the full range of motion on my elevation turret until it stops, back down. And I'll do that a couple times, because sometimes what happens with the grease inside, it kind of gets sticky, right? So I'll do that with both elevation and windage, right? Will, I don't know if that's a good practice to have. That's something that you don't need to do because optics are so good nowadays, or what are your thoughts on that?
So I definitely know a lot of people that did that, especially, and I mean, you guys could speak more to it than I can, but from what I would hear, it used to be something that on the old USMC Schmidt benders that you guys used to use, and even the 3 to 15 premieres, but more so the Schmidt benders that would need that reset. And I guess what some guys found was actually sometimes there would be spring back. So an erector system is essentially gears and a spring, right? So if you look at some rifle scope designs, at the base of the erector system, that center saddle section, some rifle scopes will even have like a little plastic nub that kind of sticks out at an angle. That's actually room for the spring to move as the spring gets compressed when you're dialing your elevation, right? So essentially what some guys would notice is there was what some people would describe as whiplash, where you'd actually have a little bit of drifting. So you'd actually, like if you wanted to dial 3.5, you'd actually dial up past 3.5 to like 3.6 or 3.7, and then come back to 3.5 to sort of ease up that whiplash. Because if you just went straight from 0 to 3.5, there'd be a little whiplash in there and it wouldn't seat properly, and you might get a tenth or two discrepancy. But I don't know if that's what you guys saw, but I know that that was something that people would see with the old USMC Schmidt benders. I would say in modern optics, like anything released within the last few years, it's not as much of an issue. Although I have seen some interesting situations arise when it comes to specifically like turret grease, which is always kind of interesting, which is why I'm not a huge fan of certain scopes that you have to remove the turret housing to reset the zero, just because I don't like exposing that turret housing, but that's a different discussion. So yeah, I don't know. You guys could speak more to that than I can. I never used one of those Schmidts, but yeah.
No, for sure. I think it was definitely a thing, and it's something that I think I do mainly because it'll also allow me to see what my full range of elevation travel is after I've zeroed, to just give me a general idea of like, okay, hey, I can take this thing out to 1,500 yards before I have to, start holding over. You know what I mean? Yeah, for me, I haven't seen any issues with even some of these small, like my D&T. I haven't had any of that stuff for these modern optics. So something to do, especially gives you a peace of mind. Yeah, so conducting these tests builds shooter and confidence in your equipment. Okay, so a couple things that we haven't talked about that I think are important that you guys have asked. Number one, let's talk mounting solutions, right? One of our biggest things that we see in class, right, for in-person class is guys buy a super nice optic, but they pair it with a shitty set of rings, all right? Again, the optic platform system is the weakest link in the whole precision rifle system, not including the shooter, right? So with a good optic a mounting system, right? Whether it's Area 419, Badger Ordnance, Spur, Hawkins Precision, right? I've run all. I have a bunch of Spurs and stuff like that, right? You're ensuring that as you're taking the optic on and off or under recoil, right, that the optic is able to return to zero. And again, in today's world, we have fucking crazy add-ons to our optics, such as digital levels, freaking dope card and data card holders, right? So like you're starting to see mounts with screws all over the place, bridges over the top for weapon-mounted laser rangefinders. Okay, I would say the biggest thing when it comes to selecting rings is not only obviously getting a quality set of rings, right? But the second thing would be the height in which that you get it, right? Frank Gallant and Chris Way from Riflecraft and Cypress Hide, they've been talking about higher rings with regard to posture, which I definitely am okay. I mean, I'm completely agree with, right? In terms of how we interface with that rifle system. Me personally, I think it's super weird to have super tall mounts, so I stick to like more of a medium range, right? But just understand that the lower is not always the better, right? And I think we've gotten away from that, right? In terms of selecting too low of a rings, right? In terms of your overall body mechanics. So the heights that we like are anywhere between like a 1.25 inch, right? All the way up to, let's say, a 1.54, right, to give you the clearance that you need for a good jaw weld, right, but to keep your head upright when you're even getting it down into the prone position, right? So higher rings, right, are not necessarily better, but they're definitely a lot better than getting as low as you can to, you know, your objective bell. So that's what I'll say. And number two is the QD stuff. I remember that was a big thing back 10 years ago, or maybe like the 2016 to 2000, even like 21. So like maybe 5 years ago, it was like everyone wanted QD rings and stuff like that. And it sounds sexy, but the freaking ass pain of having to re-zero your optic every time you went from one gun to another, this is why people just would buy 2 scopes, right? Because the amount of ammo that you would waste from, okay, I want to take my rifle scope from my 6.5 Creedmoor back to my 308. And sure, like you could dial in the offset or whatever, but I found it to be a complete waste of my time. So then I just bought 2 optics and I forgot the QD lever, right? Not saying that it's a thing, but yeah, I don't abide by it anymore. So just having a typical screw mount. I'm typically using one-piece mounts, right? Gives me a sense of mind. But if you're looking for like Enero Hunter or you're really trying to cut weight, there's nothing wrong with split rings. Again, I think modern manufacturing tolerances and CNC machines like that, there's less need to, what's the word I'm looking for, Will?
You're probably talking about bed the rings?
Lap rings, lapping rings.
Yeah, lap the rings, bed the rings, yeah.
Lap rings, it's not as common as you need to anymore, right? But there's some gunsmiths that say that, you know, not every rifle mount is perfect. But what you could do to kind of really, in my opinion, I think kind of test that to see is if you start seeing, what you would do is you would mount your optic, get everything set up, shoot maybe a 200, 300 rounds, and then take your optic out of the mount to see if you have markings on your scope tube, right? Because if you do, there's some type of imbalance there, right, under recoil. At least that's what I found earlier on in my career. But again, you typically don't have to worry about it anymore. And then lastly, I'll say for the optic package, when you buy an optic, every time I buy an optic, the other thing that I'm always accounting for is some type of level. This is a Flatline Ops Halo X. Because it's nice and big, you don't have to have that one, but there's a bunch of different levels out there. They're all not created equal like everything else, right? So finding one, whether it's an analog or digital level, will always be on my optic, because especially if you're shooting in the mountains and stuff like that, you're not always able to see the horizon line. And really the biggest contributing factor to a lot of shooters missing windage-wise, right, or laterally-wise, is the induction of cant into the rifle system. Especially as a right-handed shooter, they're typically hard on the downstroke, which is causing them now to roll over to the right? And again, if they have bad fundamentals or bad posture, they're looking to the right anyway, so it kind of looks level to them. So they're just all effed up, right? So, you know, if your corrections are not making sense, it's probably because you've built cant into your rifle system as you're shooting. So always account for an anti-cant device with your optic. Now let's talk about mounting, or actually how to mount, right? Multiple different ways, right? The option that I love the best is using an actual dedicated scope level tool, such as, I'm trying not to freaking plug too much stuff here, but so there's either the Short Action Customs Final Scope level, there's also the Badger Ordnance Dead level, and there's also the Aero Products Scope level tool, okay? What I like about the ARCA, or the Short Action Customs and the Aero Products, is they have ARCA built in, so I've been able to take this to the range or out in the field with me as an instructor and help shooters mount their optics. And essentially what you're doing is this is a perfectly flat base. I get my level up to make sure this is level, and then verify with the plumb bob, right, that my reticle is straight up and down at 100 yards, okay? And then level the optic to this mounting system, and then eventually then put that on my rail and stuff like that. The only downside to this technique is that unless you know exactly where you want your rings to be at on a monolithic or a unimount, right? There's no way to check eye relief until you're actually on the scope. So what I would recommend if you do this technique is that you mount the optic kind of first loosely on your gun, figure out where your eye relief needs to be, okay? And then just mark it and then mount it on this. The second technique, and this is very difficult, right, because you have to get your rifle like locked down and super steady, is you would level the whole rifle system. You would get, there's like the Wheeler leveling kit that allows you to put the level on the barrel, right, to make sure that as you're adjusting things that the rifle stays trued, okay? And then you would mount the optic on top of the gun, right, doing the same kind of system, right? Now, depending on who you talk to, and you know, this is the true fact, is that the elevation turret is not always going to be perfectly square to the optic, okay? And so what you could do is use, not washers, gauges, feeler gauges at the bottom, because the bottom is always going to be pretty mechanically square to the base, right? So that is one technique, right? But most people will always just verify with the plumb bob, right? Or another thing that you could do if you have a high-powered flashlight, right, is essentially get this close enough to a wall where it projects the image of the reticle, right? And now you're just able to use the reticle wall as long as you put like a level system, a mechanically straight up and down a line that you can reference off of in terms of mounting. So many different ways, many different techniques on how to do it. A good investment on Amazon, I believe, would also be, I thought I had one here. I don't know if I still have it. But one of those Klein digital levels, like orange, it's like $10, right? But that's pretty accurate that I found with leveling my optics as well. A good way to check to see if one of your levels is bad, however, is you take your level. So this is like a stare at number 135. You set it down, and then you would rotate it completely 180 degrees. And if it is off, then that is a bad level, okay? And you don't want to use that. So that's a way to check your levels, to just make sure that they're calibrated as well. Okay.
Can I throw one more sort of less expensive? I do think that scope leveling tools are fantastic, but not everybody wants to blow money on those, so I'll offer an alternative. Something that I do is I'll use the Wheeler kit off Amazon. So it comes with a couple levels. One you put on the barrel, and I'll just have my rifle essentially bipod and then a rear bag, and I'll have it leveled out. And then the other level I put on my action rail because you should never level off the top turret of any scope. I have it, like, I've spoken to the owner of Tangent Theta, and he says even our scopes, the top cap is not always going to be 100% level. If you do want to level off the bottom of any center saddle section should always be flat, because that's literally the erector housing, and that's what the spring is coming against. So you'll see guys with split rings use like playing cards or any kind of shims that you can shove under there. Spur has like a wedge. But what I'll do is I'll use the Wheeler kit. I put my my scope base. I normally use one piece, but I also use split rings sometimes. I'll put it on the action with the bubble level that from the Wheeler kit, the second one on the action rail, make sure that's all nice and good. Then what I'll do is I have what's called a DFAT So for those of you guys that are really into dry fire at home, I would highly recommend a DFAT, but essentially it's a ring or like a disc that goes over your objective lens to allow you to focus much closer. And I'll just use my DFAT and then plumb bob against the wall across my living room. So now I can plumb bob, but the DFAT allows me to focus like 15 yards away, so I don't have to run to the range and do it. And because it's on my gun, I can also set my eye relief at the same time. So just use a DFAT with a plumb bob and the Wheeler kit, and that should get you pretty close. And I mean, honestly, not to toot my own horn, but I don't think there's anybody that's mounted and unmounted scopes in different mounts more than I have on this planet. It's so just another alternative.
Not to also toot Will's, but Will also lives in LA's and his house is tiny, and so the fact that he's able to get all this done within his little office that he has there is pretty impressive. So I highly recommend that DFAT system, especially if you want to improve on your skills as a precision rifle shooter, starting off on your journey and getting your reps in and stuff like that. That DFAT system is awesome. But yeah, it allows you to do a lot of things in very close spaces and proximities. A lot of guys set that stuff up in their garage and stuff like that, so they're not, dry firing in their open range or in their freaking garage outside. And looking like a sniper or whatever, scaring the hell out of their neighbors. So,
you guys talk about the flashlight method?
I did. I touched on it a little bit. Will you put in the flashlight through the end of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and showing the reticle.
Yeah. One thing that I do, not to chime. I just heard you guys talk about mounting stuff, so figured I'd chime in. When I do mount a scope, the first thing I get level is my bubble level that's going to go on my scope. Because if I have to move the scope, once I get it set up for any reason, as long as that thing is level, I can just move it within the rings. Mm-hmm. It makes everything go by faster.
Yeah. Yep. Good call. Okay. I think that is it for mounting and stuff like that. Let us know if you guys want us. Damn, we kept 62 people here for 2 hours. Y'all are awesome.
Yeah,
glad that period of instruction was entertaining enough to sit and hear us talk for 2 hours with this shit. And obviously we could have gotten more because we barely just skimmed over the details on these last parts. Let us know what type of content that you want to see with regard to more scopes, right? Let's do a run through real quick. In terms of price ranges, that's one of the things that we did want to talk about for everyone that might be in that market. So we're going to back up here to mid-range. And I don't know, is Ian on?
He was on.
Oh, look at it. Perfect. Entry level. Okay. Entry level optics that we recommend. Vortex Strike Eagle. Ian has a freaking plethora of those. And maybe I've seen one that he's had to send back. And Vortex, as you guys know, has a really great, awesome warranty, right? In terms of like, if something happens to it, send it back. I've used that when I was running Vortex. I know my team has used that for range finding bottoms. They're super awesome about that. Okay, so definitely check that out if you're in the market. The PST Gen 2 is great. I think with a discount, if you're in the military, about $800 to $1,200 option. The Arkin scopes, you're starting to see really a lot of those, especially those guys that are, buying, let's say, a Seekin setup, an Aero Precision, or maybe a Tika, and they're throwing that $600 optic. Again, for getting your foot into the door of long-range shooting, that's going to be a great value for $600. The D&T, that's what I have on this gun here. I'm impressed with it for that price point. Okay. What am I missing at that price point, Will?
I mean, that's probably it. If you want to go used market, the Night Force SHV, they've discontinued that, but they did have an F1 that was like a 4-14 by 50. That was a pretty decent option in that price point. If you are looking used, Phil touched on it, the Viper PST Gen 2. The Gen 1s did have a substantial amount of tracking issues, so I definitely would not recommend that. But the Gen 2s are good to go. And And the older Bushnells are pretty solid too. You can find them on the used market if you're kind of cruising around that $1,000 ish price point. Their Bushnell had a few good options there too.
Okay, mid-tier. This is the 15 to 2500. This is the guys that want to spend a little bit more, right? They're maybe like looking into the door of competitive shooting, right, and want to at least still have a competitive edge. The best bang for your buck in this price range, at the end of the day, I think is the Leopold Mark V. I think it's arguably one of the best, most well-rounded scopes on the market, right? So I see a lot, guys that would rather buy 2 Leopold Mark Vs than 1 Tangent Theta, right? Because now they can outfit two guns with that scope, and it obviously doesn't hold back guys like Francis Cologne and Morgan King, who are phenomenal freaking shooters. John Pinch runs a Mark V, and so I'm really curious to see the new NX6 line. I just got a feel for them not at SHOT Show, but at a couple of the matches that those guys had it at. So I'm really impressed to see those. The NX8, I've heard has had some issues. I haven't seen any with the ones that I've run into in the law enforcement classes, but I know they're out there. The Vortex, if you find a Vortex Razor Gen 2, that optic will always be a tank. That optic probably has a lot of trophy wins in terms of like all the shooters that have used that optic combined for how long it was on the market. Will, would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but you can literally frame your house with that optic. That thing is a tank.
Yeah.
But I think also in that mid-tier used market, you're looking at 5 to 25 attackers and stuff like that, which if you see one of those, or even the Collis K624 eyes, I love that optic, one of the original optics that I first started running when I was running Collis's. So that is in that. Check out Sniper Side, but also on Facebook on the NRO Hunter buy, sell, trade, and then also the Optics buy, sell, trade. But make sure before you buy an optic that you see that the seller is vouched for, because there's definitely a lot of bots and people that will take your money from that, okay? So proceed with caution if you end up buying from that. But I've had great transactions on Sniper Side. I actually got this Schmidt & Bender 6 to 36 thanks to my buddy Will that coerced me into buying one off of Sniper Side, and the transaction was great. Everyone vouched for him, so no issues there. Anyone mid-tier that I'm missing? Steve, any optics in the mid-tier platform that you recommend?
You muted.
I wasn't talking, Eric.
Okay, sorry. Just went after you.
I don't have anything really.
Yeah. Eric, you?
I mean, the Mark. I don't know how much the Mark IV is compared to the Mark V, but I think the Mark IV is also a really good option in that mid tier. I don't know if you already said it in like the lower tier or not. Guess I wasn't paying attention. I think they're like 1,500.
Will? What am I missing?
Yeah, so the Mark IV is going to be, depending on the magnification you get, it could be closer to like 1,300 to 1,500, or if you get the really low magnification ones, closer to $1,000 for the Mark IVs. The Mark Vs are really good. A couple of other options in that like sub 2,500, if that's where we're going. Apex Optics has the Apex Rival, which is pretty good, 4 to 32 by 56. Telson Optics, the Tractoric, I reviewed one of those. The Delta Strikers are good as well, kind of in that sub 2,000-ish price point. If you look, and it doesn't take a lot of effort, on the used market, you can find a Razor Gen 3 for sub $2,500. And if you get one of those for sub 2,500, you've made out like a bandit. The new 4 to 24 is phenomenal if you want to save weight a little bit, but the 6 to 36 has been also good to go. And you can find those used. On Sniper Side almost every day. There's a Razor 3 6 to 36 for like 22, 23, $2,400, and I think it's phenomenal value there. Now you're starting to see the Collis K5 to 25 also in that on the used market for around $2,500 if you look and you're kind of patient. So that would also be a good buy there. I think, yeah, I mean that's probably it right there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, 25 to 4,000. This is brand new. Pretty much the optics that Will was talking about that you would probably buy brand new that are, you know, the Night Force Attacker, right? I think that optic is tried and true, right? With military applications, just the durability of it, especially like, you know, there's a lot of guys out there that are just like have a hard on for like military related stuff, right? They're like, hey, I have what Marine Corps snipers use.
We call them cloning.
So there's nothing wrong with that, right? But the Schmidt Benders, I think they're making a comeback really well. I've been impressed with the 6-36 and even my old PM2 here that I got from the Golden Bullet Champ from a few years ago. Like Will said, the Vortex Razor Gen 3, this thing is awesome. I'm super glad that I was able to get my hands on one, thanks to John. But yeah, also, you know, my Collis K525s. I'm always going to be a fan of just because of the overall ergonomics, right, and features that are unique to the Collis line of optics, right? But for me, the K525i is like my most well-rounded optic that I use for all my rifles. And honestly, people always ask me this all the time, is like why I still run the 5-25s versus the 540s or the K328is, is because the trigger cam doesn't fit on the K328s or the K540s, and everyone loves watching my content. The scope mates are too big to fit on the K328s. I have them, but essentially, depending on the angle in which I'm interfacing with the rifle, the scope mate will bite me. So that's why I just stick to the K525Is for most of my rifle builds still anyways. That being said, moving into now the premium or ultra high-end Zero Compromise, Tangent Theta, Collis, March. So the two optics that I haven't owned in this are the March and Tangent, although I have definitely messed with Eric's and Will's Tangent Theta. The Zero Compromise, I have 5-27. That optic is great. I think it's nice and robust, right? Especially, I had an older generation before they had the non-locking turret version, as well as now the 10 mil turret version. But I think the glass is pretty phenomenal there. The Collis K328 and K540, the field of view in the eye relief is super hard to ignore. However, it requires you to get or mount your optic a little bit more forward than you're probably used to. So having like a cantilever mount is something that you need to consider for that optic. But I think if you're getting up into this price range, right, I would definitely go to a few matches or get through a bunch of other scopes before you make a decision, because this is definitely this is a big ticket item that you're investing a lot of money in. But like I said, right, when you're talking about getting into competitive shooting, if you break down the cost analysis of what it actually takes of your time to go shoot a match, right, you're probably spending $1,000 on travel, $500 on lodging, anywhere between $300 to $500 on bullets. That includes training for the match and actually shooting the event. If you're hand loading, right, taking time off of work, right. So you're $4,000 to $5,000, maybe for your first match, maybe even a little cheaper than that. Let's say like $3,000 to $4,000, including food and stuff like that, and your time. Okay. By the time you're done with two matches, I mean, technically you could have bought a higher end optic, right? But giving you that peace of mind so that you don't spend $3,000 just to find out that your optic isn't tracking or something happens. I actually had that with a shooter in my squad at the PRS finale. Phenomenal shooter. He essentially lost 0 halfway through the match because he didn't tighten one of his set screws. So stuff like that happens all the time. Being able to just, understand your equipment. And Steve said this best, and I think it's very underrated in terms of like when you buy a scope, read the scope manual, right? Actually take the time to understand how to read your reticle, but also how to float your turrets. I can't tell you how many times we've been on the firing line at the foundational level course, and it's the first time guys have, even zeroed or floated their turrets, and it was what we call it, and they don't even know how to operate the mechanical system of that. And so we're sitting there on YouTube, thank God for YouTube, where it's like, hey, how to zero or float the turrets on this specific optic, right? It's gonna just save you a ton of time by taking the time to read your manual and how to do that and just go through a couple of reps of doing that. So yeah, that is all I got. Guys, there's 59 of you guys still in here. Thank you guys so much. We've been doing this for 2 hours. Robbie, thanks for being here. Feedback, let's take 5 minutes. We'd love to hear some feedback, how we can improve. Off the bat, I can already tell the PowerPoint is definitely blown out video-wise, so I apologize about that. It's always hard to nail focus on myself, but also the whiteboard. So some things that I might be thinking about is probably a black background for the PowerPoint, but hopefully you guys were able to follow along. Guys that are going to be watching this recording are probably going to be pissed off, right? But the information, I think, is still there. What else? Pace was okay? Okay. Pace was okay over here on my end. Instructors, thanks for tuning into the chat and putting those fires out and giving your experience. That is, yeah, guys, that's what you can expect for our webinars. We try to do it once a month, every second Thursday at this time. I can't remember what next month is, but yeah. If you guys are looking to maybe train with us, right, head over to our website. We've got foundational level classes, advanced classes, even though I hate that freaking word, and then performance competition classes. There's descriptions in each one of those classes depending on what you think your skill level is at. And I'm going to try to say this as kindly as I possibly can. Take your skill level of what you think you are and subtract 1, because that's typically where a lot of shooters kind of live at, right? Is we often get a lot of guys that take our advanced level class that should have definitely gone to a foundation class first, right? And it's nothing against you. It's just understanding that when you're going to an event, especially like if we have 10 to 12 students. We want to make sure that the class is flowing smoothly based off the curriculum, and it sucks to be that guy that has to be pulled off to the side because they're not quite getting the concepts, and it's a little embarrassing. And it honestly, it kind of ruins your experience as a student because you're starting to feel bad that you're not keeping up with the rest of the class and all that stuff, right? So reach out if you have any questions with what class you feel like would be best, and me or one of the instructors will tell you exactly, hey, in order to get to this class, this is what we're probably going to be expecting from you. So if you're able to check all those boxes, absolutely. If you have any questions with gear, reach out to us, use our contact page. Me and my team have a plethora of experience of gear that's out there, what's worked, what hasn't worked. I'm sure every single one of us has a bin full of just bags that are completely worthless because, again, we've just evolved and seen what's worked and what hasn't. And stuff like that. Competitions, if you can't go to training, definitely check out our YouTube, get some drills on there, but also go to a competition. Competition is going to get you out of your comfort zone. And again, Steve said this best in a podcast. If you feel like you're going to the range and you're bored, go to a competition to where you can essentially identify what you can now do at the range to practice and have more intentional training. Especially if you feel like you're doing the same thing over and over again, you can either get some experience or feedback at a class or at an actual competition, whether it's a 1-day or 2-day event. A 1-day event's gonna be a lot lower barrier to entry because it's probably gonna be a local match that you can drive to, and the match fees are probably gonna be $50 to $60. But I promise you will probably learn more at your first match than you would have trying to figure out everything yourself for the first 2 or 3 years. So yeah, that's all I got. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate all my instructors, and we'll see you guys in the next webinar, hopefully, or at an event. Come say hi if you see us, and we'll see you guys next time. Keep your face on the gun.